Well, we're in September now. It's been a great growing season. We've really enjoyed some beautiful weather when it wasn't just a bit too hot. And a lot of things grew really well. We've enjoyed a lot of fabulous flowers and foliage. Now we're thinking about what are we going to keep for next year? And we can do that a couple ways. One way is by overwintering full plants that are not hardy. We're usually talking about things we consider annuals. Things like geraniums, fuchsias, and coleus are some of my favorites to take cuttings from, and that way you have new fresh plants for next spring. I also have a salvia here today because I don't have any fuchsias right now, and I want to show you how to do that. I'm Scott from GardenWorks. Let's figure out how you can easily root cuttings and keep plants that you love this year for next year. Before we get started, why don't I tell you a few of the things that you should collect together or have that are really helpful. The first thing is I've got a tray, and the tray is pretty helpful because it's not too deep. You could use pots for your soil, but I've got a tray with some inserts in it, and just about perfect in my opinion. So tray and inserts, and then a starter mix. It could be what they call, we often call a seed starter mix, but sometimes it's called a starter mix. And that's just a really nice, loose, friable, sterile, so there's no disease problems or anything, mix that's used for starting seeds and for rooting cuttings. And then the other thing I have is, believe it or not, a pencil, but that's what we call in this case a dibble, and that's to make the little holes where you're going to stick the cuttings. A pair of nice, clean, and probably sterile pruners. You can just do that by wiping them with alcohol before you start. And I think you need a rooting hormone. This is a rooting hormone. There's rooting hormones in a variety of strengths that this is the lowest strength, which is all you need for the kind of the soft cuttings we're going to take. It's a #1 rooting hormone. There's a #2 and a #3, and the #3 is quite strong. So just go for the #1. And I've got a little tray that I would put some of the rooting hormone in. I'll go talk about that later. I think that's it. Handy little thing I'll talk about at the end is just a heating pad that you put underneath, and that heats the soil and it encourages faster, better rooting. The first thing you want to do is fill the tray or your pots with the starter mix, and then just tamp them gently down so that it's not super loose, but you do not want it to be really, really packed. So just gently tamp after you fill it. It's a great idea just to water in. You don't want to soak the soil, but you definitely want to use the water to actually get rid of a little bit of the air pockets that will naturally occur if you don't water. So that's the main thing here, but not get it soaking wet. Once you put soil into your container, your flat or whatever it is, then you can go out and get cuttings. You may want to get them from the plants that are in your garden or in big pots, and that's quite all right. Go out and collect all the material you need, and then you can prepare it and stick the cuttings once you get them back to your workbench or wherever you're working. It might be your kitchen table. Got lots of material here to make cuttings from. My scented geranium, the salvia, and the coleus. And you can do this a couple different ways. One of the things you need to do though when you start, and I'll show you this little tray, and I use this pencil as a dibbler, and that's just to make a hole. You don't want to use your cuttings to push into the soil. You want to, that just damages some of the tissue, and maybe it would mean they don't root as well. These are easy to root, so it's not too bad. You just take the pencil and make holes all the way along. And once you have your holes made, you'll have a spot to put your cuttings. I'm being pretty ambitious with how many I'm going to try and propagate, that's for sure. Okay, so I've got my dibbler holes. The next step is really just actually preparing and sticking the cuttings. So I took these big chunky trimmings, and sometimes you can get more than one off of this, but you don't want to root this big heavy thing. You're going to want to root something that's a bit smaller. And it turns out that as the plant hardens and the harder the wood is or the tissue, the less that it roots. So using younger tissue is better. I usually like to use something that's going to it's not too soft, but that'll snap off. But on these, it basically means that a cutting about 1 inch to 2 inches long is fine. Love this scented geranium, so we'll start with those. I talked about the stem root, the rooting hormone at the beginning, the #1 stem root, and I tip that into a little sauce or something like that because I don't want to contaminate the whole jar by putting each cutting into that jar. Use what you're going to use, and you know, keep this for another time, and it won't be contaminated. Won't be any moisture in there. So I do that, and then I take my cutting that I talked about, the 1 to 2 inches long, cut it, tidy it up a little bit, dip it in the rooting hormone, and then carefully put it in the hole I've already made with my dibbler, and then just give it a little gentle tamping down around it to secure it. So here I've successfully actually stuck one cutting. That's what they kind of say in the industry, you're sticking cuttings. And I really recommend that if you have enough of the material, that you do plenty of cuttings. That way, if you have only 40% root, or half of them root, and you did 10, well, you've got 5 new plants. If you did 20, you've got 10 new plants. So whatever you can afford to do. And of course, you may have only so much space in your tray for all the plants you want to try and propagate. Half the fun is just how great it is when you're successful and you have all these new plants. So I like to make lots. After you've stuck your cuttings and you've gently firmed them in, you water them in, and then you're pretty much done that part of the project. And the only thing you have to think about now is how you keep the cuttings sort of turgid and firm as they're rooting, because they'll just dry right out. So there's a couple things you do. One is mist the foliage, so that there's mist on them, or water on the leaves. And the other thing you do is you can use this greenhouse cover. Some people will use a plastic. You've probably heard or seen people using it, putting their cuttings in, just putting a plastic bag around the thing. This is really super pro looking, and you can cover quite a few, and it's usable for many years. Every day or two, take this off, let it air out. That'll discourage it from sort of rotting or any mildew or problems happening. So you do that, and if it's starting to dry out, you check. You can water a little bit to keep the soil moist but not really wet, and you can also give it a spray to up the humidity level. The coleus are going to be tricky. The coleus dry out, the leaves will get wilty really fast, so that's one where this humidity will really help. And the other thing you can do is somewhere around here, I've got the, might have mentioned this at the start, the heating pad. So you just slide that right underneath, plug it in, and it keeps the soil that they're rooting into warm, encourages faster rooting and a higher rate of rooting. And then you can use that in the spring when you do your seeds. You'll be delighted with how quickly your seeds will germinate in a nice warm soil. And the last thing I just want to say, you can get all this stuff together in one of these kind of kits. So it's a great way if you're starting from scratch to get the heating pad, as well as the inserts, the tray, and the greenhouse sort of lid. I think that's it. If you like doing this kind of stuff, you like our videos, subscribe down on the YouTube subscribe button, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.